Broadly, one of the things we're going to talk about today is impermanence, right? Impermanence is a very recurrent theme in both Eastern and Western philosophy, ancient Greek as well as ancient Indian, obviously. And the other major thing we're going to talk about is the idea of self. And then we'll do the sutta reading. Okay, great. Let me start by sharing screen and no man ever steps in the same river twice, for it's not the same river and he's not the same man. Heraclitus, who started first talking in one of the earliest people talking in Western philosophy about impermanence, right? So by the time a second act of stepping in happens, it is not the same river and it is not the same man. The Buddha actually talked a lot about impermanence. So that's what we'll begin with today. And one thing, so there are a bunch of concepts that we have discussed over the last few days. So keeping that in mind, I just wanted to introduce another way of classification. So I talked about how the Buddha was quite rigorous on root cause analysis when we talked about the four noble truths, right? So now I just want to talk about another classification that he gave. So classification was the other thing that he did often to explain things, right? So I wanted to talk about the five aggregates. We've talked about most of these, right? So we've talked about roop or form, which is the material realm, right? So everything that is in the material world. So not just physical matter, but also, information traveling in the form of material waves, right? So light waves, sound waves, etc. Everything. So roop or form includes your internal sense spaces, includes the corresponding elements of the external world as well, right? So your eyes, your ears, your nose, your tongue, your body, your mind, the physical aspects of it, and the physical world, the corresponding information, the corresponding visual information, sound information, taste, smell, tangible information, and mental information, right? The second thing that he said is Vedana or feeling or sensation. We talked about this. Feeling or sensation can be pleasant or unpleasant, or it can be neutral, right? So there is an entire spectrum. The third is concepts or perception. We talked about this when we said, we have different layers of concepts in our mind. You could, if at the right, in the right era, if you saw Mahatma Gandhi, you would identify him. If you talk to him, you would know it is him. If you saw a video, if you saw an image, even today, after so long, if we see a caricature, we are able to recognize that, right? So that is the realm of concepts and perception, or you can call this the storehouse of concepts and mental models, which is Sanya. And the first words are the ones in Pali, and the second words are the equivalents in Hindi or Sanskrit, right? Sangya. We talked about this as well. The fourth thing that we talked about was conditioning. So I didn't use this word sankhara in Pali or sanskara in Hindi or Sanskrit. And this is a word a lot of us would have heard, especially those in India, right? So sanskar is normally used colloquially to denote values. So values systems are just a part of your conditioning. So that is one way in which your conditioning, and conditioning can be many types. It can be genetic, it can be experience based, what experiences you've had, what you've experienced, right? And it can be context based as well, right? What is happening right now, what happened right before, that is coloring what you're doing. And then you have Vijnana or Vijnana, which is information processing that we've used in our example, right? So the faculty of information processing, and there are these faculties are present in the Buddha's classification for each of the sense bases, because that is what is most relevant, right? So our experience of the world, our window to the world is our sense bases, and the corresponding information processing abilities corresponding to those sense bases are there. So eye, ear, nose, body, tongue, and mind consciousness, right? And this is consciousness or information processing. So why are these called the five aggregates? So the word in Pali is kandha, or the equivalent in Hindi or Sanskrit is skandha, right? And this means literally like heap, right? And I have an image on the right of the ingredients required to make a cup of ginger tea, right? Adrak chai. So it's ginger, milk, tea leaves, water, and sugar, right? So these are essentially the ingredients of your experience, right? And with these five coming together, so any experience that you're having starts with something happening at a sense base, right? So we discussed this earlier as well. Contact happening, then a feeling happening. As we start having a sensation related to that contact, we are enriching it further with our information processing and our concepts, right? So you, for the contact to happen, for you to smell the pie, you need to have your nose that is active. You need to have the physical counterpart of it in the real world, which is the smell coming from the pie, which is essentially the small molecules, right? And you need to have the information processing ability. If you don't have that, you won't be able to smell. So many people are smell blind, for instance, right? And these three things coming together leads to feeling, and feeling is accompanied with further information processing and further addition of concepts. You're layering the contact with the environment with more and more concepts. So it goes from being a pie, as you continue, cycling through your information processing, it goes from a smell of a baked good to smell of a pie to a blueberry pie to a slightly overbaked blueberry pie, right? And then the underlying all of these is conditioning, right? So conditioning affects your ability to process certain information. If you've never smelled a pie before, you won't be able to identify what it is, right? And if you don't know what is a pie, you won't be able to add the concepts. If you don't know what is a blueberry pie, you won't be able to identify that concept. And your feeling, right? Somebody may be revulsed with baked goods, for instance, or somebody may have a very neutral feeling, and somebody may just start salivating, right? So your conditioning is affecting your vedana or feeling, your concepts or sanya, your consciousness or vigyan, right? As well as your form itself, right? So what experiences you've had, what genetic disposition you have, all these things affect your form as well. So these are the five ingredients that need to come together for any moment of experience. And how does this relate to impermanence that we talked about, and how does this relate to self, which we talked about in the teaser for today's talk, right? So you can see each of these things are always in flux. They are never constant, they are not permanent, they are not eternal, right? Form is continuously fluctuating. We know for a fact that all the cells of our body get replenished at a regular rate, and within some 7 or 10 years, right, you don't have a single cell from the body that you had at that point of time. And it's an even easier way of looking at it is just look at your body from when you were a child to a teenager to now, right? So there is a difference in the physical attributes, right? Yeah. And there is a change in sensation. So I personally I took the example of how I used to respond when I used to hear someone honk, right? Growing up in Delhi, and what that meant to me, and what kind of feeling it would evoke in me, versus now it changes completely. Same thing would have happened to you about different things, right? So maybe the news of a cricket victory would have brought in different emotions to you earlier in your life versus now, or your a favorite some new series dropping in, right? You might have a different feeling about it in season 1 and different feeling in season 8, maybe. Right? So these things are always in flux. Your concepts, your perception, your mental models of things are constantly changing. Even through this retreat, right, we've introduced new concepts of craving, of clinging, of feeling of Vedana, right? So these are concepts that you might have already had or you might not have heard of. And even if you've heard of them, they've been enriched. They are altered from what they were in the past. Your conditioning is changing. Already, every report across the board talks about how, you are able to uh, understand how craving is coming up and you're responding to it differently, right? Your consciousness is also changing, right? So if, for example, you were untrained with music and then you got training in music, then your ability to listen to different notes, hear different notes, or hear somebody who's singing off key and identify that goes up, right? So all of these things are continuously in flux, continuously changing. It is never the same man, it is never the same river, right? So that's one thing that we need to understand. And our experience of life, right, comes when these five ingredients are coming together. So every moment of our experience is like a new cup of ginger tea, right? And something or the other is changing. Your conditioning is definitely changing because the context is changing. Your form may be changing at that moment, or it may change over a greater period of time. Your feeling will be very contextual. Your concepts will be very conceptual. They may change over a period of time. And your information processing will also change. A very simple example of that is, I'm sure all of you might have heard, there are these high pitched tones. And, as you get older, you stop hearing them beyond a certain point, and everybody tries to test and insist that they hear it beyond what they are actually hearing, right? So that typically happens. So these things are continuously in flux, and our experience of life, which is coming through the coming together of these things, when it is affected by craving and clinging, it gives birth to a strong sense of self, right? So this is something we discussed. What we need to understand is something that is predicated or emerging from things that are continuously in flux, continuously changing, continuously impermanent. It cannot be eternal and unchanging itself. We saw the video of the fake hand experiment, right? And what is happening is you're generating a sense of self at any point of time. It seems to be your true self or eternal self, but what you are actually experiencing, what you're actually using to make decisions, to see what things happening, is a sense of self. There is obviously a continuity to it, right? So your conditioning doesn't flip from absolutely minus 100 to 100 with respect to things overnight, right? So it's not like, one day you are you know absolutely addicted to sweets, and the other day you can't give two hoots about them, right? So it's not fluctuating. Your feelings aren't fluctuating that rapidly. However, they're constantly in change, and something that is derived from these changing elements is not eternal and unchanging. It is always depending on the situation. And what happens is, when we bring craving and clinging into the way these things come together, right? And the Buddha calls this Panch Upadan Skandha, or right, five aggregates bound together with craving and clinging. Craving predominantly having the flavor of I like it or I don't like it, which further colors your clinging. That is the story or the meaning or the narrative that you attach to a situation, right? Okay, given that, given the understanding of impermanence, and given that when these five aggregates come together with craving and clinging, with the illusion of a permanent self, rather than understanding this is just a sense of self that has emerged right now, right? So how does that affect us? So here's another classification that the Buddha gave, which is called the three characteristics, right? It's called the tilakhan, or teen lakshan, or three lakshan, right? So three characteristics of existence. So there are three words here. Anatta. Anatta refers to anatma, right? That what you're experiencing is not personal. It is not related to a permanent, ever changing self, right? So it is a sense of self that you have in the moment, right? So if someone honks the horn at you, it doesn't mean that your permanent eternal self is permanently eternally challenged and insulted, right? It is something that has happened. You have potentially brought up a sense of self which is feeling insulted, offended, and wants more than anything else to take revenge on that. The second characteristic is anicca, or the Hindi or Sanskrit equivalent would be anitya, that things are in flux, things are not permanent and eternal. Everything that we experience, all conditioned things, all things that are put together, right? So this laptop is put together, my body is put together, right? So the camera that I'm using is put together, the desk I'm using is put together. So all of these things have come together because the conditions are right for them, right? And when the conditions are not right for them, they will not stay that way. This impermanence is something more than what we are discussing, more than what you intellectually already understand, more than the terms that I'm using. Each one of you is experiencing in your practice. You see things come up and you see things disappear. You bring up the object, in a while it fades away. You have some distraction come up, as you siksar it fades away. You have little noises, maybe some people have talked about a little music coming up, comes up in the background, and when the conditions are not right for it, it goes away. What makes them sustain is your attention with craving, but eventually that too subsides away. That isn't permanent either. And the third word, of course, is something we covered earlier in the Four Noble Truths. Dukh is suffering or dissatisfaction that emerges from this. So we'll just take a quick look at how not understanding that things are happening due to an impersonal process, right? We walk through the entire process of going from one attentional moment to another attentional moment, right? We had a contact event where there was a smell of the pie, our nose and our olfactory information processing faculty kicking off, right? So, and that impersonal event, something that happened, suddenly became, this is happening to me, I want it, I will be happy only if I get it, right? And I hate my doctor for saying that I shouldn't have it. So that kind of thought process happens, leading to some kind of dissatisfaction. So how does that happen? Let's how we take things personally, do not understand the impermanence in them, and thereafter leading to suffering. So I'm going to use a few examples. All of them will not apply to everyone. These are by no means an exhaustive list, right? And the idea is, if you can relate to some of these things, you can actually start using what you're learning in your practice, what you're seeing in your practice, and what you're learning in these talks to action. You can start thinking and acting in that direction. Okay, so if we don't understand anatta, we take things personally. We see things as if, the person who honked at me has insulted me forever after, right? And it is all about me. It is not maybe about the fact that the other person maybe just simply lacks road etiquette, or the other person may be in an emergency, or maybe their child was playing a prank and honked the horn, right? So the reality, the truth doesn't matter, right? If I don't like it, if I have a painful sensation, the truth will not spoil a good story in my mind of why I dislike it and why I hate that person. So let's just look at this, right? So let's look at things, and I've kind of made a 2 by 2 of this. Things that maybe we like, we have a very pleasant feeling towards it, we really want it, we take personally, and we want it, and whether or not we have it. So like or dislike, and have it or don't have it. So when we take things personally, we like we like something but we don't have it, and some examples of that could be, at different points of life, different times, you may have the amount of money that you need, or you may not have it. You may have it for the future, you may not have it, right? You may have the love of uh, both romantic love or love of your family, etc., right? You may want it, but you may not have children, right? You may want it, but you may not be getting the kind of respect or recognition that you're looking at. You may like it, but you may not be getting the kind of opportunity there. Now, what happens when we don't understand impersonality? We take this personally. Our mind, under the influence of craving, says, "I will be happy only if this thing changes in my life. I will be happy only if that thing changes in my life." So, therefore, since that has not changed, since the world is still sending me signals that the things have not changed, therefore I cannot be happy. And when we don't understand impermanence, we think this is a permanent situation. So the kind of questions that kind of signify not understanding impermanence is, will I never have this? Will I never be happy? When will I have this? Right? So those kind of things is kind of characterize not understanding impermanence. And what can this lead to? This can lead to dissatisfaction, hopelessness, jealousy, impatience. When will I have it? Right? Jealousy. Why don't I have it when someone else have it? Hopelessness. I will never have it. I will always be caught in this position of liking and not having it. Everybody experiences this after a breakup, for instance, right? Dissatisfaction. Why can't I have that kind of a car, right? Why can't I buy a car for myself, new car for myself? Impatience. When will this happen? Frustration, loneliness, right? So rejection, desperation. So all these kind of different flavors. Again, not an exhaustive list, but more illustrative. You may have some like something and you may have it too, right? Your cake, you can sometimes eat it and have it too, right? So you may have health, you may like your health, you may have youth, you may like it. You may have family, friends, money, like it. And what you may feel is that this should always be permanent, right? And when any of those changes, you're setting yourself up for extreme disillusionment or extreme sadness, actually, extreme sorrow, extreme dissatisfaction. And even when you have it, you have covetousness. You get something and then you have a fear of separation. You have insecurity that maybe this good thing that I have might go away, right? I hope I'm never separated from this. I don't feel as good anymore. I won't feel as it doesn't feel as good anymore, right? So if you don't understand impermanence, for instance, you may get into like it often happens in all kind of relations, friendships, romantic relations, marriages, right? You want it to be permanent. The feeling that you have at the time that you were the happiest, you want it to be permanent, and you may continuously have a complaint or grouse in your mind that it doesn't feel like what I thought would be permanent. Why doesn't it feel the same? Why have things changed? Why have you changed? Why have I changed? Why doesn't it feel the same way? Third part of our matrix, don't like it and have it, right? So this is fairly easy. Everybody knows their pet peeves, ailments, relations that have gone bad, body image issues. This is very, very common, very, very prevalent. Feeling of being oppressed, feeling of disrespect, personal loss when you lose someone, financial trouble, professional stress. Don't like it and have it, and continuously you have a problem with it. You have dissatisfaction coming from it. And when you don't understand impermanence, you may be very, very despondent because you feel, what if this never goes away? What if I never become happy? What if my body never changes the way I want it to? What if my financial troubles never go away? Right? So when we don't understand impermanence, we can have sorrow, we can have lamentation, we can have pessimism, bleak outlook towards the future, blame, resentment. It is because of X person and Y person that something I don't like has happened to me, right? Blame with relatives and family members that it is this person who has kind of made my life unhappy, right? I don't like it, but I have it. And it's very easy to blame other people for that when you're caught up in craving and clinging, because then the only thing that matters is not how you can simply let go of that, get that mandarin out of your hand, pull your hand out of the jar. It is about why I don't like it and why there is a problem with the world. Don't like it and don't have it. And these are things that you can have fear about coming into your life. Fear, aversion, anxiety. I hope I never have ailments. how can I guarantee this will never happen? This should not happen to me and to my family, right? So those kind of thoughts, don't like it, don't have it. So when we take things personally, we are getting very identified with it. We feel that this is our permanent unchanging self, right? This things will always be like this, and I will always feel this way about this thing, not understanding that you are not the same man that stepped in the river, and not understanding impermanence. You're not understanding that the river is not the same either. Things are not permanent. Things that seem to be good will not always feel that way and may not always be with you. Things that seem to be horrible may not always be with you and may not always feel that way. It is the same understanding. They may not always feel, which is when you stop taking things personally, or things will change on their own over time, but they will take a direction which is nothing to do with what you intend for them, right? And when you want to use your attentional skills, your understanding in a mindful way, in a applied way, in an intelligent way for your own benefit, you're able to let go of the craving and let those things feel differently. You're able to see the impermanence and understand that things are like this now, but they may be different tomorrow. If I have something good, let me enjoy it now, but let me not be so attached that if it goes away, my happiness is predicated on my being with it and completely gets jeopardized. Or if it is something that I don't like, let me not look at it as something that always necessarily has to be a part of my life, or that I will always feel the same way about it. Great. I'm going to take a pause there. If there are any thoughts or any questions, you can let me know. And after that, we will start the Sutta reading, which will be, which I'll just talk about. So I'll just take a pause for a second. It's okay. So we don't need to have immediate Q&As because these are very uh, deep things, and they you need to allow them to percolate within you, and questions will come up over the next few days. You will find that you yourself have a much greater ability to answer these questions based on what you've been practicing, what you've been understanding, and we can always discuss them. uh, you can send it in the form, or you can just drop me a message to discuss this, right? So don't feel pressure to ask questions right away. Okay, before I start the sutta, so let me give a brief introduction to what a sutta is. So this will be an interesting experience for those of you who are doing it, who are listening to one for the first time. So the suttas are essentially the Buddha's teachings, and they're said to be have been memorized and reported by his attendant Ananda, and that's why they always begin with "Thus have I heard," right? And there are different classifications of sutta. One of them that I use frequently, that was used a lot by my teachers, Bhante Vimala Ramsey also, was the middle length discourses or the Majjhima Nikaya, right? And I'll be reading one of those suttas. The word sutta or sutra literally means a thread. And the different discourses, they act like different threads that are coming together to form a fabric of understanding. So that's why they're called suttas. Even in the Vedic tradition, they're called sutras, right? So the ancient tradition was twofold, right? So one, different sutras that are talking about different topics that are all interconnected to it. If you think about it, over the last week, every talk has been referencing other talks that have happened before it. So it forms together a kind of fabric of understanding. The second thing is, these also represent the way these sutras were have been recorded, were representative of the oral tradition, right? So at the time of the Buddha, there was not much writing technology or equipment or whatever, right? So for almost 500 years, these suttas were transmitted orally, and it would be very interesting. So the sangha of monks or disciples of the Buddha, each one of them would repeat the suttas and the others would listen and correct that person. So they would be listening and learning as well as correcting through mutual accord all the time. And that's how these were passed on before they were initially recorded. So they are designed for the oral tradition. There will be a lot of repetition because these things would kind of seep into the mind over a period of time. So there was a very specific technique of the oral tradition, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a image of the Buddha addressing his disciples on the screen, right? And the way I want you to listen to this is just pay very close attention with your ears. You can see the screen image on the screen, or you can close your eyes, but I want you to listen. I want this to go in these times. We are very, very used to absorbing information through our eyes, but the way this is constructed, this sutta, it is meant to be delivered through the ears, right? So I'd like you to lend ear, or give ear, which is the term that is used in these traditions also. Give ear, right? Attend closely, give ear. Great. So let me just hydrate a little bit, share my screen, and then we'll begin. It'll be a while. You should pay close attention, and if you can, you should do your practice right after this, right? So I'm just going to share my screen with you. Just 1 second. Just give me a moment. Okay. So the sutta I'll be reading is the 148th in the middle length discourses of the Buddha. This is called the Chachakkā Suttā, or the 6 sets of 6. Thus have I heard. At one time, the Buddha was staying near Shravasti in Jetha's Grove, Anathapindik's monastery. There the Buddha addressed the students. Students, Venerable Sir, they replied. The Buddha said this: Students, I shall teach you the Dhamma that's good in the beginning, good in the middle, and good in the end, meaningful and well phrased. And I shall reveal a practice that's entirely full and pure, namely the 6 sets of 6. Listen and apply your mind well. I will speak. Yes, sir, they replied. The Buddha said this: the 6 interior sense fields should be understood. The 6 exterior sense fields should be understood. The 6 classes of consciousness should be understood. The 6 classes of contact should be understood. The 6 classes of feeling should be understood. The 6 classes of craving should be understood. The 6 interior sense fields should be understood. That's what I said but why did I say it? There are the sense fields of the eye, ear, nose, tongue, body, and mind. The 6 interior sense fields should be understood. That's what I said, and this is why I said it. This is the first set of 6. The 6 exterior sense fields should be understood. That's what I said, but why did I say it? There are the sense fields of sights, of sounds, of smells, tastes, touches, and thoughts. The 6 exterior sense fields should be understood. That's what I said, and this is why I said it. This is the second set of 6. The 6 classes of consciousness should be understood. That's what I said, but why did I say it? Eye consciousness arises dependent on the eye and sights. Ear consciousness arises dependent on the ear and sounds. Nose consciousness arises dependent on the nose and smells. Tongue consciousness arises dependent on the tongue and tastes. Body consciousness arises dependent on the body and touches. Mind consciousness arises dependent on the mind and thoughts. The 6 classes of consciousness should be understood. That's what I said, and this is why I said it. This is the third set of 6. The 6 classes of contact should be understood. That's what I said. But why did I say it? Eye consciousness arises dependent on the eye and sights. The meeting of the 3 is contact. Ear consciousness arises dependent on the ear and sounds. The meeting of the 3 is contact. Nose consciousness arises dependent on the nose and smells. The meeting of the 3 is contact. Tongue consciousness arises dependent on the tongue and tastes. The meeting of the 3 is contact. Body consciousness arises dependent on the body and touches. The meeting of the 3 is contact. Mind consciousness arises dependent on the mind and thoughts. The meeting of the 3 is contact. The 6 classes of contact should be understood. That's what I said, and this is why I said it. This is the fourth set of 6. The 6 classes of feeling should be understood. That's what I said, but why did I say it? Eye consciousness arises dependent on the eye and sights. The meeting of the 3 is contact. Contact is a condition for feeling. Ear consciousness arises dependent on the ear and sounds. The meeting of the 3 is contact. Contact is a condition for feeling. Nose consciousness arises dependent on the nose and smells. The meeting of the 3 is contact. Contact is a condition for feeling. Tongue consciousness arises dependent on the tongue and tastes. The meeting of the 3 is contact. Contact is a condition for feeling. Body consciousness arises dependent on the body and touches. The meeting of the 3 is contact. Contact is a condition for feeling. Mind consciousness arises dependent on the mind and thoughts. The meeting of the 3 is contact. Contact is a condition for feeling. The 6 classes of feeling should be understood. That's what I said, and this is why I said it. This is the fifth set of 6. The 6 classes of craving should be understood. That's what I said, but why did I say it? Eye consciousness arises dependent on the eye and sights. The meeting of the 3 is contact. Contact is a condition for feeling. Feeling is a condition for craving. Ear consciousness, nose consciousness, tongue consciousness, body consciousness. Mind consciousness arises dependent on the mind and thoughts. The meeting of the 3 is contact. Contact is a condition for feeling. Feeling is a condition for craving. The 6 classes of craving should be understood. That's what I said, and this is why I said it. This is the sixth set of six. If anyone says the I is self, that is not tenable. The arising and vanishing of the I is evident. So it would follow that one's self arises and vanishes. That's why it's not tenable to claim that the I is self. Therefore, the I is not self. If anyone says sights are self, that is not tenable. The arising and vanishing of sights is evident. So it would follow that one's self arises and vanishes. That's why it's not tenable to claim that sights are self. So the I is not self and sights are not self. If anyone says I consciousness is self, that is not tenable. The arising and vanishing of I consciousness is evident. So it would follow that oneself arises and vanishes. That's why it's not tenable to claim that I consciousness is self. So the I, sights, and I consciousness are not self. If anyone says I contact is self, that is not tenable. The arising and vanishing of eye contact is evident. So it would follow that oneself arises and vanishes. That's why it's not tenable to claim that eye contact is self. So the eye, sights, eye consciousness, and eye contact are not self. If anyone says feeling is self, that is not tenable. The arising and vanishing of feeling is evident. So it would follow that oneself arises and vanishes. That's why it's not tenable to claim that feeling is self. So the I is not self, sights are not self, eye consciousness is not self, eye contact is not self, and feelings are not self. If anyone says craving is self, that is not tenable. The arising and vanishing of craving is evident. So it would follow that oneself arises and vanishes. That's why it's not tenable to claim that craving is self. So the eye, sights, eye consciousness, eye contact, feeling, and craving are not self. If anyone says the ear is self, the nose is self, the tongue is self, the body is self, the mind is self, that is not tenable. The arising and vanishing of the mind is evident. So it would follow that oneself arises and vanishes. That's why it's not tenable to claim that the mind is self. So the mind is not self. If anyone says thoughts are self, mind consciousness is self, mind contact is self, feeling is self, craving is self, that is not tenable. The arising and vanishing of craving is evident. So it would follow that oneself arises and vanishes. That's why it's not tenable to claim that craving is self. So the mind, thoughts, mind consciousness, mind contact, feeling, and craving are not self. Now, students, this is the way that leads to the origin of identity. You regard the eyes like this: this is mine, this I am, this is myself. You regard sights like this is mine, this I am, this is myself. You regard I consciousness like this is mine, this I am, this is myself. You regard eye contact like this is mine, this I am, this is myself. You regard feeling like this is mine, this I am, this is myself. You regard craving like this is mine, this I am, this is myself. You regard the ear, the nose, the tongue, the body, the mind, thoughts, mind consciousness, mind contact, feeling, craving like this. This is mine, this I am, this is myself. Now, this is the way that leads to the cessation of being identified. You regard the I like this: this is not mine, this I am not, this is not myself. You regard sights like this is not mine, this I am not, this is not myself. You regard eye consciousness like this is not mine, This I am not. This is not myself. You regard eye contact like this. This is not mine. This I am not. This is not myself. You regard I feeling like this. This is not mine. This I am not. This is not myself. You regard craving like this. This is not mine. This I am not. This is not myself. You regard the ear, the nose, the tongue, the body, and the mind like this. This is not mine. This I am not. This is not myself. You regard thoughts like this. This is not mine. This I am not. This is not myself. You regard mind consciousness like this. This is not mine. This I am not. This is not myself. You regard mind contact like this. This is not mine. This I am not. This is not myself. You regard feeling like this. This is not mine. This I am not. This is not myself. You regard craving like this. This is not mine. This I am not. This is not myself. The underlying tendencies. Eye consciousness arises dependent on the eye and sights. The meeting of the three is contact. Contact is a condition for the arising of what is felt as pleasant, painful, or neutral. When you experience a pleasant feeling, if you approve it, welcome it, and keep clinging to it, the underlying tendency to greed underlies that. When you experience a painful feeling, if you hold on to it, if you sorrow and wail and lament, beating your breast and falling into confusion, the underlying tendency to repulsion underlies that. When you experience a neutral feeling, if you don't truly understand that feeling's origin, ending, gratification, drawback, and escape, the underlying tendency to ignorance underlies that. Students, without giving up the underlying tendency to greed for pleasant feeling, without dispelling the underlying tendency to repulsion towards painful feeling, without eradicating ignorance in the case of neutral feeling, without giving up ignorance and without giving rise to knowledge, it's quite impossible to make an end of suffering in the present life. Ear consciousness, nose consciousness, tongue consciousness, body consciousness. Mind consciousness arises dependent on the mind and thoughts. The meeting of the three is contact. Contact is a condition for the arising of what is felt as pleasant, painful, or neutral. When you experience a pleasant feeling, if you approve, welcome, and keep clinging to it, the underlying tendency to greed underlies that. When you experience a painful feeling, if you hold on to it, if you sorrow and wail and lament, beating your breast and falling into confusion, the underlying tendency to revulsion underlies that. When you experience a neutral feeling, if you don't truly understand that feeling's origin, ending, gratification, drawback, and escape, the underlying tendency to ignorance underlies that. Students, without giving up the underlying tendency to greed for pleasant feeling, without dispelling the underlying tendency to revulsion towards painful feeling, without eradicating ignorance in the case of neutral feeling, without giving up ignorance and without giving rise to knowledge, it's quite impossible to make an end of suffering in the present life. The end of the underlying tendencies. Eye consciousness arises dependent on the eye and sights. The meeting of the three is contact. Contact is a condition for the arising of what is felt as pleasant, painful, or neutral. When you experience a pleasant feeling, if you don't approve, welcome, and keep clinging to it, the underlying tendency to greed does not underlie that. When you experience a painful feeling, if you do not hold on to it, sorrow or wail or lament, beating your breast and falling into confusion, the underlying tendency to revulsion does not underlie that. When you experience a neutral feeling, if you truly understand that feeling's origin, ending, gratification, drawback, and escape, the underlying tendency to ignorance does not underlie that. Students, after giving up the underlying tendency to greed for pleasant feelings, after dispelling the underlying tendency to repulsion towards painful feeling, after eradicating ignorance in the case of neutral feeling, after giving up ignorance and giving rise to knowledge, it is quite possible to make an end of suffering in the present life. Air consciousness, nose consciousness, tongue consciousness, body consciousness, mind consciousness arises dependent on the mind and thoughts. The meeting of the three is contact. Contact is a condition for what is felt as pleasant, painful, or neutral. When you experience a pleasant feeling, if you don't approve, welcome, and keep clinging to it, the underlying tendency to greed does not underlie that. When you experience a painful feeling, if you do not hold on to it, sorrow, wail, or lament, beating your breast and falling into confusion, the underlying tendency to repulsion does not underlie that. When you experience a neutral feeling, if you truly understand that feeling's origin, ending, gratification, drawback, and escape, the underlying tendency to ignorance does not underlie that. Students, after giving up the underlying tendency to greed for pleasant feeling, after dispelling the underlying tendency to revulsion towards painful feeling, after eradicating ignorance in the case of neutral feeling, after giving up ignorance and giving rise to knowledge, it is quite possible to make an end of suffering in the present life. Seeing this, a learned, noble disciple grows disillusion with the eye, sights, eye consciousness, eye contact, feeling, and craving. They grow disillusion with the ear, nose, tongue, body, mind, thoughts, mind consciousness, mind contact, feeling, and craving. Being disillusioned, unwholesome desire fades away. When unwholesome desire fades away, they are freed. When it is freed, they know it is freed. They understand birth of reactive personality is ended. The journey of wisdom has been completed. What had to be done has been done. There is no return to any state of reactivity. That is what the Buddha said. Satisfied, the students approved what the Buddha said. And while this discourse was being spoken, the minds of 60 students were freed from defilements by not grasping. All right, then. If you can all just turn on your videos for a moment. I'm guessing that would be a new experience for at least some of you. I would highly recommend doing a sitting right after the talk. Yeah, I won't say too much. We have heard the words of the Buddha. Not too much to add at the moment. Have a lovely evening. Keep smiling, and I'll catch you in the morning meditation. And do remember after you're sitting to fill up your forms so I can respond to them in the morning.